one of the stories in the chapter, one of the chapters, I should say, in the book, talks about how my wife, about a week and a half in, said, "Scott, why are you doing this?" She said, "You got what you wanted. Why are you continuing to push this?" And it dawned on me that even though I talked about many of these things before the campaign, in fact, I actually ran an ad that talked about pension and health care contributions, I hadn't really talked about it from the day after the campaign till the time I pushed my reforms. And I was so eager to fix things, I didn't bother talking enough about them. And it was really one of those self-reflection moments where I realized if my number one constituent, Tonette, my wife, wasn't fully embracing what I was doing, then it was probably time I started spending more time listening and then explaining before I was just pushing things forward. And that was one of the turning points in this entire effort. I think in the end, what voters are hungry for in the states and across the country are leaders who are authentic, who tell people what they're going to do and then go out and do it. And Chris may have a slightly different way of doing it than I do in Wisconsin, but I think in the end, the reason why I, and a whole lot of other Republican governors are doing much better than our counterparts in Washington is because we're actually telling people what we do. We've got optimistic visions of where we're going. We speak in terms that are relevant to the voters in our states. And then most importantly, we have the courage to act on those convictions. And I think that's the thing that people are hungry for.
And now these latest figures that are coming available, a lot of conservative groups that supported you appear to be part of a secret probe, part of the government to isolate, find out who they are, what they knew, who they knew. Pretty intimidating stuff. What do you make of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It's never dull in Wisconsin. It's particularly never dull during election time, which seems to be almost all the time in our state. But in the end, we're not intimidated. We're not intimidated by any of this. And not just me. The book tells us stories about how they went after me, my family, my cabinet, my kids, lawmakers in the state.
Yeah,
even
but this is up the ante considerably.
This
is all of these groups have been, these conservative groups, dozens of them that supported you in your recall effort, been subpoenaed by a special prosecutor. This is pretty like almost Gestapo type, tactics.
Well, we've seen time and time again in this state attempts to try and intimidate people, and time again, the good news about what I share in the book is that we withstood that pressure.
Part of that story is understanding that Obamacare, the health care law, was a mistake. Do you think the president knew that it would be as big a mistake that he actually lied to the American people?
Well, I think the bigger problem he has is that it appears on this and many other issues, for someone who's never been a chief executive before, he relied almost solely on the political shop in the White House and not on the policy team. And I said, either way, it's bad. Either he knew and didn't tell us, or he didn't know. And if he did know, it's on the thing that is got his own name on it, the thing that's going to be the legacy for his entire presidency. In either case, either he knew and he didn't tell us, which is horrible, or he did not know, and he certainly should. Either case, I think that's a huge indictment on this administration and their failures to put people ahead of the politics. If I could magically have my way, I think I'd probably put 2 governors on the ticket, because I think,
really,
particularly if Republicans are going to go up against Hillary Clinton.
So you would make Christie, I guess Christie would be your running mate.
Oh, I think there's 30 pretty good options out there right now, as well as a couple former governors. I think at this point the narrative's going to be Hillary Clinton is all but certain to be the Democrats' nominee, and she is a product of Washington. I think to put any Republican governor up, again, either current or former, provides a sharp contrast to saying the problem in Washington can't be solved by people who are of Washington. They need to come from people who are proven reformers in the states. And that's why there's a few exceptions. Paul Ryan has that reformer mentality.
But I also think there was a message in your book, and that is bluster is fine. Being in your face and standing up for what you believe in is fine. But a little bit of soul searching and admitting you made some mistakes, admitting you were wrong, something we've not seen out of this president, maybe something we don't see out of Chris Christie, might be a subliminal message. Is that true?
Well, I think a number of lessons. We took that. That certainly was one. I also talked about things as simple as talking about austerity is not the answer, reform is. Right. Really trying to have a focus of being real people that typically aren't the case in politics. In politics, for whatever reason, we expect our candidates to pretend to be perfect and to do everything exactly right. I think in many cases it takes listening to the people, not compromising by no means on your principles. I've been a firm conservative across the board, but oftentimes in terms of method, learning not just from my wife, but learning from other voters in our state about better ways to communicate and better ways to lead. And that's something I think our party needs to do nationally as well.
All right. By the way, I would never admit my wife is right, but touche to you, Governor. Again, it's a fascinating book. Well, I do tell people watch this fellow very, very closely.